Okay, the recording's on and we're ready to go. So yesterday we learned about a machloikis if a ger is allowed to marry a mamzer, because it says in the pasuk lo yavoi mamzer bekal Hashem. Are gerim considered kahal Hashem, or are they not considered kahal Hashem?
Yes, that's right.
That was the question. If a ger is considered kahal Hashem, then they're not allowed to marry a mamzer. But if a ger is not called kahal Hashem, then he could marry a mamzer. So it's sort of a double-edged sword, because by a ger has a heter to marry a mamzer, but that's only after he accepts the insult that he's not part of kahal Hashem. So the Gemara ended up bringing the makor, the source for the machloikis between Rabbi Yosy and Rabbi Yehuda. It's because it says many times in the pasuk lo yavoi bekal. Many times it mentions in the Torah, it says lo yavoi mamzer bekal Hashem. It says amonu lo yavoi bekal Hashem. Gamdor asir lo yavoi bekal Hashem. It says kal Hashem 5 times. And Rabbi Yosy learned chad l'kohanim, chad l'levim. One to tell us that kohanim are prohibited from marrying these isurim. One to say levim. One to say Yisraelim. One to be mater a mamzer to a shtuki, one to be mater a shtuki to Yisrael, but we don't have any extra words kahal to also include gerim to say that they're also not allowed to marry these yisurim. And since we don't have an extra pasuk for it, in fact, they could marry these yisurim. That's the sheet of Rabbi Yosy of kahal gerim lo yikri kahal. Rabbi Yehuda says we do have an extra kahal, and either he consolidates kohanim and levim, or he consolidates mamzer b'shtuki and shtuki b'Yisrael, or he consolidates, or he says we have a different kahal of kahal hukachas lochem v'lager hagar. So we have many different options for Rabbi Yehuda to have the extra kahal to include gerim in the iser to marry a mamzer. Beautiful. Zok to Gemara Misayeyele. I think we did this yesterday towards the end of the day, but we'll start from Misayeyele, about 10 lines down on Ayin Gimel Amarav. Misayeyele l'Rav. This is a right to Rav. The Amar Rav Yudah Marav loy huzaru ksherais linasei l'psulim. Even though I should go a little bit back. It said, ger, echad ger, vechad eved mishucher. Both a ger and an eved mishucher, or a chalol, mutorim b'kohenes. So even though a kohen cannot marry a geyeris, and a kohen cannot marry an eved mishucher, or a shivcha mishucheres, or a kohen may not marry a chalola, but a bas kohen is allowed to marry the male counterpart of all these people. It's only kohanim ksherim are also linasela psulois, but ksherois, kahanois, abbas kohen is allowed to marry all the psulim. Not a mamzer, which is allowed to marry those people who are possible for a kohen to marry. Dorish Rab Zera b'mechuzah. Rab Zera was not politically correct. He said it the way it was. So he announced in Mechuzah, ger muter b'mamzeres. Thinking that, wow, he opened the door for gerim to marry so many different people. They took it the wrong way. They were insulted. How dare you call us not mikahal Yisrael? We're not ikrikal, and that's why you allow us to marry a mamzeres. Ragmu kula alma be'esregayu. Everyone stoned them with their esrogim. I guess this psak must have come out on Sukkot. Now, there's different pshatim why bedafke esrogim. One of the basic pshatim is the purpose of the Daled Minim is to show all of Klal Yisrael together, and you, Reb Zera, are sort of cutting us out of Klal Yisrael. So that's why they threw their esrogim out. I would say it's because it was a Shana Rabbah. They didn't need it anymore. But that's not what the Rishonim said. Amarava, mi ika the Dorsh Milsa ki hai virduchte de shchichi geyori. Rava said, Reb Zera, you're not politically correct. It's a very nice drush, and it's true, but that's not how you present it in a place where you know you're surrounded by gerim. Rava said, this is how I would do it. Darish Rava b'mechuzah, you know how Rava did it? He did it in a more politically correct way, and he introduced the halacha a little more subtly. And he started off with ger muter b'kahenes. A ger could marry a kahenes. Oh, that means we're pure. We're even allowed to marry into mishpachas kahuna. And then to unu b'shiroi, they gave him beautiful clothing. They applauded him. And then after he got their attention and they were happy with him, hadu darish lahu, then he darshan ger muter b'mamzeret. So Amalei told him, all of the applause that you got when you gave us a vote of confidence, and you said that we're allowed to marry a Giyoris, we're allowed to marry a Kohenes, now you've taken away from us by telling us that we're also allowed to marry Mamzeres. Amalei told him, listen, these are the facts. I'm doing good for you. You could find women anywhere, and whoever you want, you could practically marry. You could marry from the most purest of the Yidden, of Kohanim, but if you want, you could even go as far as marry a mamzer or a mamzeres. Ger muter b'kohenes, umuter b'mamzeres. We pass him like Rava Darshan. Muter b'kohenes is like huzru ksheres li nase l'psulim, umuter b'mamzeres grab Yosy. Beautiful. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Zok the Heilige Gemara. Elu hein shtuki. Kol shemaker. So the Mishnah told us the definition of a shtuki is a child who's able to identify their mother, but they cannot identify their father. And whenever they point out their father, their mother tells them, "Cha, that's not your father." Amarava. Devar Torah, shtuki kosher. Shtuki is kosher midaraisa. Our Mishnah says shtuki are not kosher to marry into Klal Yisrael, but midaraisa a shtuki would be able to marry Yisrael. My timer, what's the reason? Let's think about it. Any typical person, take any typical woman, she's allowed to marry roiv men in the world. Roiv ksher metzla, umid psul metzla. A typical woman who's not a nation ish. Roiv of the world are not her kroivim. Roiv of the world are not mamzerim. Roiv of the men who she would have relations with would not make the child a mamzer. Umid psul metzla. So let's think about this. We have a rule when it comes to roiv. Kol the parish, meruba parish, v'chol kavua kamechza mechza. And that is, if someone goes into a plaza, and in the plaza there are 10 meat stores. 9 of those meat stores are kosher, and in one of those meat stores are treif. And you walk into one of the meat stores and you buy meat, and then when you come home, you open up the package, and you don't remember which meat store you went into. Even if 9 are kosher, and only 1 is treif, you do not go basarayt. Because kol kavua kamechza mechza. If you go into the store to buy it, you don't go basarayt. But what if you found a package of meat in the parking lot of this plaza, which it already left, whichever store it originated from, the chol ha'parish, you go basarayt. So here, where we have the woman who's the known mother of this shtuki, there's 2 ways she could have given birth to this child. There's 2 ways she could have conceived this child. The azli inu legaba. Let's say she entertained them in her apartment that night. Then you'll say, kol de parish, mura parish. Whichever man came into her room and had relations with her came from the roiv. Roiv men that would have had relations with her would have yielded a kosher child. So you can go basarayt. My Amrit, what might you suggest? Dilma Azla Ihi Ligabayu. Maybe they spent the night in his apartment. So now it's called Kavua. So Havalei Kavua. The Chol Kavua Kamechza Mechtadam. So it's still 50-50 that this child is a mamzer, 50-50 that this child is kosher. But the Torah says, Lo Yavoi Mamzer. Mamzer Vadai Hu de Lo Yavoi, HaMamzer Sofik Yavoi. The Torah specifically tells us that a Sofik Mamzer is mutter. And only a Vadai Mamzer is Aser. And the Torah goes weiter and says, Bekal Vadai Hu de Lo Yavoi, HaBekal Sofik Yavoi. he only cannot marry a kalvada, but not a kalsofit. Therefore, a mamzer is allowed to marry a shtuki. So if that's the case, if me'ikar adin we've demonstrated that a shtuki should be mutter to marry a bas Yisrael, uma tam omru shtuki puzzle. So why tak is a shtuki puzzle? So Gemara, gzeira shema yisa achoysemeyo. It's a gzeira that you might end up marrying your sister from your father. If you don't know who your father is, then any woman that you marry, there's a small possibility, but a real possibility, that this daughter is also the daughter of this unknown man who had relations with your mother. So therefore, in order to avoid a catastrophe where someone would end up marrying his sister, we do not allow him to marry any Yid. Ela fragt die Gemara, ela me'ate shtuki lo yisa. Based on your logic, we know a shtuki is allowed to marry a shtukis. He's allowed to marry a woman who we don't know who her father is. But based on your logic, though we're concerned that a brother marries a sister, it shouldn't be allowed, even for a shtuki to marry a shtukis, because she also might be his sister. She doesn't know who her father is, and he doesn't know who his father is. So, El Me'ata Shtukas Lo Yisa Shema Yisa Achoyse Me'aviv. Zok Gemara, come on. Kol Ki Hai Maslu V'Azli. Are you going to say that every shtuki in the world came from the same father? So you're telling me this father who was mizana with every woman in the world who was mizana? He was the master of snus, and every unknown child came from him? So the Gemara says, because of that, we can't say, not likely Thomas Tabit and say that every single shtuki was fathered by this same man. So therefore, a shtuki can marry a shtukis. But Freit Gemara, even a bash shtukis lo yisa. He shouldn't even be able to marry the daughter of a shtukis. Why? Shema yisa chayse me'aviv. Even if he knows the father of the child, but that father might be his. Even if he knows the father of his potential wife, that father might be his father as well. Ella lo shchicha. What you're forced to say is, it's lo shchicha. We're not going for it because it's so unlikely that a woman he's going to meet is going to be his sister. Zok Gemara hachanami lo shchicha. So then let him marry any Bas Yisrael. We don't know who his father is, but it's so unlikely that the woman that he meets, that he wants to marry, she happens to be the daughter of his father. So therefore, me'ikar adin, a Yisrael should be able to marry a shtukis. Ella, so why is it that it's not allowed? Elamayla asu b'yuchsin. Chazal made a special maila in yuchsin, a special chumrah to keep our yuchsin and Klal Yisrael pure, and therefore they said a person should not marry a Yisrael, should not marry a shtuki. Okay, gewaltig, and it's just a shtuki. So Ella loy shchiach in Rashi loy shchiach. It's about halfway down in the wide lines. And Rashi's maskana de kushi. That's just a maskana de kasha. In other words, there's no reason me'ikar din why a shtuki cannot marry a Bas Yisrael. Ella lahachi loy chayshina mishum de loy shchiach. Shetinotzi loy chos. It's unlikely. Inami shtuki milsad lo shchicha umilsad lo shchicha lo godzav arabanan v'zeker. Rather, it's an extra chumer b'yuchsin. There's a special chumer they made for yuchsin. They're trying to keep our yuchsin pure. Gewaltig. V'omar Rava. Let's look at a Sufi. And a Sufi is someone who not only doesn't he know who his father is, but he also doesn't know who his mother is. A Sufi kosher. Mikradin, and the Sufi should be able to marry any woman. My timer. Eisha b'bailotoy. Let's think about it. He doesn't know his mother. So what are the chances that he's going to marry a child who's also his sister of the same mother? Because since he doesn't know his mother, let's think about it. A normal woman doesn't just abandon her child. You know why? Because if a normal woman is mizana, a married woman, and because of that she has a child, a mamzer, she's not going to just throw it in the garbage and make it into the Sufi. She'll say, no, I'm pregnant, yes. I had a baby, yes, but the father is my husband. She'll deny that she was Mizana. So she would not throw her child away because she could claim that it's her legitimate child. So my Ika, so what type of woman are we should abandons her child? Miyut arusais. If she's an arusa, she can't blame it on her husband because they're not living together yet. So there, if she has a baby, she'll want to conceal it and she'll throw the baby away and make it into a nesufi. And miyut shahalach ba'aleim lebedinas hayah, or a woman whose husband went away to travel for a year, and suddenly she's expecting and she has a baby, she'll throw the baby out because she has no way to claim that it's a legitimate child, and because of the embarrassment of a mamzer, she'll abandon the child. But Kivan Ika Panuya, out of all the women out there, many of them are single women who, even if they have a child that's fathered by not their husband, it's not a mamzer. The Ikanami, the Machmas Ravoin, so there's other women that would throw their children out. They'd be an Isha, they'd be an Isha that were Arusas. They would throw their children out. Why? Because they're illegitimate. But there's other women that would throw their child out, even though the child's not a mamzer. A Panuya who had a child would throw her child out because she doesn't want to be caught having a child. So even though it's not a mamzer, she'll throw it out. And the Ikanami Machmas Rabban, a woman who has a child legitimately, but they're so poor, they simply cannot afford to support this child, they'll throw it out. So there's 4 possibilities of why a woman would throw out a child. 2 of them is because they're a mamzer, and 2 of them would not because they're a mamzer. So I have a palga. It's a 50-50 chance that this child is not a mamzer. Mamzer vale huda lo yavoy, ha mamzer sofik yavoy, the kalvade huda lo yavoy, ha bekal sofik yavoy. So oibazoi umatam omru a sufi boss. Can't be al sofik mamzer. So why is it that a Sufi cannot marry a Jewish girl? So the Gemara, the same reason as Shatuki. He might end up marrying a girl who is a sister. Correct the Gemara. If that's a legitimate concern, if it's a real concern, similar to what we said before by Shtuki, Asufi is Layisa. Are you going to tell me an Asufi cannot marry an Asufis? Shema Yisa Achoisai. Because if he marries a Sufi, this girl might share a mother with him, or might even share a father with him, or might even share both. Zok to Gemara, Kol Hani Shadi Basli. Are you telling me that all of the abandoned children of the world come from the same parents? Again, highly unlikely. And if that's the case, Vasa Sufi lo Yisa either. He shouldn't be allowed to marry the daughter of an Asufi. Even though the daughter of the Asufi, we know who both parents are, but we don't know who his parents are. Shema Yisach, he might be marrying his sister. Ella, what do you have to say? The reason why he could marry these people is because lo shliach. It's highly unlikely that he's going to be marrying his sister. Well, then hachanami lo shliach. So too, just marrying a regular Bat Yisrael, it's highly unlikely that he's going to end up marrying his sister. So why is it usher for Yisrael to marry a Sufi, or a Sufi to marry a Bas Yisrael? It has to be a special chumrah just for Yochsim that we're trying to keep Klal Yisrael pristine. Gebaltik. So now we're going to learn more about a Sufis when you have to be concerned that the child is a mamzer. When did they make the Smaila b'Yochsim? There are some exceptions. Amar Rava bar Afuna. Matzu moho. What if they found the child, the Sufi, but the child was gemalit? Which parents are going to mal a child that they're just discarding and leaving him to die? So therefore we say that this child is probably not a mamzer. If the child was found gemalit, the child is probably not a mamzer. As Rashi says on top, the lav the kosher who they have a tarcha be'lemimale. They would have hired a moil to big tircha. They did it because this is a child that they wanted to keep. Or mishalte hadame. If somebody has an article, I'd love to see exactly how that's pronounced. But what it means, Rashi says, is the child is made, when the child is born, it's all tahat. The nurse makes it nice, straightens out the child's limbs. It's a cared for child. So Michelle Hadmi, I'm sorry?
It's Michelle.
You pronounce it good.
Right.
Finally today, I finally pronounced something right. Okay, shkoyach.
Maybe because you are Lakewood.
I'm actually in Binghamton. Ein boy, Mishum Asufi.
Binghamton.
I'm right near the Lubavitch Chabad house, so maybe the hashpah from the Chabad house is making me pronounce things properly. So Ein boy Mishum Asufi. If the child is well taken care of, he's not an Asufi. That's one pshat of Rashi. The other pshat of Rashi is that I'm going to read inside. It's very interesting. A mamzer is less healthy. A mamzer is less healthy than a legitimately born child. I'm on the fourth line from the top of Rashi. Lishna Achrina. Mishal Tehadme a varv gedolim umalubin. He's a larger child and he's white. He looks healthy. Umazuris, child is mobile. Ein zemezana. That couldn't come from a union of znus. Elamibila from her husband. Shemitech tashmish tadir. Since a woman with her husband have tashmish a lot more often than a one-night stand, therefore avlad malubin umazuris. It makes for a healthier child. Kidama b'meshachas nida gimel chadash u'machronim during the third trimester. Tashmish yafel isha v'yafel avlad. Shemitech kach avlad mazuris umalubin. So if someone is married to a husband, they're going to have tashmish all through the pregnancy. But if it's a one-night stand, there's not going to be that tashmish, and therefore the child won't be so healthy. So if the child looks healthy, its physical attributes show that it's not a mamzer. Okay, shayef moshcha. I'm sorry.
Isn't it possible? It's very possible the other way too. A lot of kids aren't, right? A lot of kids from normal marriages aren't healthy also.
Yeah, I guess it's going basar the roiv. It's more an indication that the child is not a mamzer, or shayef mishcha. The child was smeared with oil. That's again a sign that the child was cared for, or umole kuchla, or the child had eyeshadow. I guess in those days they did that even for babies, or rami chumri. Rashi says he has certain knots, like as a necklace around the child that they did for a child refuah. Again, the child was cared for. Or tali piska. Rashi says that means it's a kameya, it's an amulet with something written in it. Or a tali kameya, is also an amulet, but it has roots and spices. These are all things that show that someone's caring for this child. All these child is ein boy mishum masufi. What about tali b'dikla? What if you hung the child off a tree in a basket? Is that a sign that the child is cared for? Zok to Gemara, imatis lechaya. If where the baby's hanging off the tree is low enough that a chaya can get to the baby and eat it, then it's still in the sufi because the position that the baby was put into clearly shows that he was not cared for. But in lav, if it's in a safe location, then ein boy mishum asufi. How about zardasa smicha lamasa?
They didn't have any raccoons in Bavel?
Abandoning a child in the city of Toronto is more dangerous than anywhere else. That's right. I saw you smiling before you took yourself off mute, and I knew what you were thinking. Because why would an Asufi be any safer than our secure green bins?
That's right. Even a squirrel can get to it.
Okay, Zardosa smicha lamasa. Zardosa is a type of tree, and if it's near the city, it was known that their mashchitzim mazikin hang out there. So that's considered a very dangerous place. Yesh b'mishum asufi, v'imlav. If it's not near the city, so it's not in a place where it's shchichi ba mazikin, then ein boy mishum asufi. Be'knishta smichta lamasa. What if it's a mismarriage that's near the city? The Bata Midrashim used to be in the fields around the city, at the outskirts of the city in those days. So it's near the city, and there's often people there. So therefore, there won't be shadim there. Ein by mishum asufi. But if there's not shchicha barabim, then it's quite possible that there's mazikim there, and that's not a safe place where a normal person would leave a child if they wanted the child's safety. Amar Memar, Hai Per the Sufli, Yesh Boy Mishum Asufi. And Rashi says, if you found the baby in a ditch that they used to dig to store the pits of their dates, that they basically stored their animal feed there. So if you throw the child in a pit, in a trough, a ditch that was normally used to store animal food, yesh b'mishum asufi, I mean, you're putting it where animals go to eat. It's like it's asking for trouble. What if you put the child in a basket like Moshe Rabbeinu was placed, and you throw the child into the middle of the river where there's a lot of boat traffic? Because that shows that you wanted this child to be found and discovered by a passing boater. Pshari yesh b'mishum asufi. Pshari means the edge of the river where someone might not find this child. I'm sorry, that's not what it means. Hisher Rashi says, Mokem Shipu Anar, I'd have Sharash Logim. It's rapids. It's I think what it means is rapids. Mokem Shipu Anar, I'd have Sharash Logim. Since there's rapids because there's a lot of rain or melted snow entering the river, She'ein Derech Svinos Laversha, where ships don't travel there. It's not a place where ships could travel. So therefore the child will not likely be discovered. That's a place where it is considered in the Sufi. Zok to Gemara, Rava says, then Rava says, Amar Rava, Uvishnei Ravin, but if it's in a year of hunger, where it's more, I'm sorry? Oh, I'm sorry, I skipped, I apologize. See, I'm scrolling and I scrolled too far. Okay. Because once again, it's a safe place. Child's not going to get run over there. And someone might discover the child. Rishus HaRabbim itself, the child can get trampled. Amar Rava comes along Rava and says, Ubishnei Rabin, if it's in a hungry year, where the likelihood is that the child's not a mamzer, and the child was only abandoned because the parents can't afford to feed the child, then the child is not on the Sufi. And the question is, in what case was Rava talking about? Hadarava Ahaya. In which case was Rava talking about? Where if it's a Shnei Ravon, the child is not in the Sufi, even though other symbols would indicate that it is in the Sufi. Ilema Rishus HaRabim. If it's when the child was placed in Rishus HaRabim, which is the last case right before Rava's remarks, ID the Shnei Ravon, Katlalei, what you're going to say that the mother would abandon the child, where the child is going to get trampled to death because they don't have money to feed the child, that doesn't make sense. That's what Rav was talking about. It must be that if you place the child at Tzidei Rishus HaRabim, there Rav said that if it's Pnei Rabbi, the child's not on the Sufi. Frank the Gemara, my ear is Shnei Rabbi. I feel below Shnei Rabbi. The Gemara, the Brisa says, or the Gemara says, without any special condition of Shnei Rabbi, just placing the child with Tzidei Rishus HaRabim, which is a safe place, we don't consider it in the Sufi. So what's Rava adding? The Shnei Rabbi. Elokit with the Rava Aha, the Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Omer Rabbi Abba, Omer Rabbi Yehuda, Bar Zavdi, Omer Rabbi. Calls man shebeshuk. If a baby is abandoned in the shuk, as long as the baby is still in the shuk, if the parents come and identify it before Bezdin scoops up the child and deals with it, if it's still lost, then if the mother and father come, they could say this is our child. Ne'emanim alav, they're believed to say about this child that it's ours, it's not a mamzer. But nesef min hashuk, someone already found the baby and took it to Bezdin. There ain't ne'emanim alav. Now if they want to say it's our child, it's not a mamzer, they change their mind. They're not believed. You know why? My time amarava hayol v'yotza alav shem asuf. Once the child is brought to Bezdin, the Bezdin declares this child already as an Asufi, they can't undo the name Asufi. While the child is still in the marketplace, no one picked the child up, not declared yet with a identification tag as in a Sufi, they could counter that by claiming it's their child. But once the child is already identified as in a Sufi, they're not believed. However, it's up to Rava, and this is where Rava said is halacha, where there's a stronger reason why parents would abandon the child, even though the child's not a mamzer, even though the child has already been identified as a Sufi, parents would still be believed to say, this is our child. There are three people that if they say Edus right away, not after a time passes, they'll be believed. Edel and Sufi, which we just discussed, parents are believed while the child is still in the shuk. Once the child has been labeled as a Sufi, child are not believed. Chaya, a midwife who's there at childbirth, we'll see his neman to identify which is the child of which mother, especially if she's in a ward with multiple mothers giving birth, she's neman is to say whose baby is whose. And the third case is upoiteres chaverseh, which we'll see in the Gemara what that means. Asufi odamoran, that we've already discussed. Chaya, the Tanya Chaya nemenes loymar zeyatz harishon v'zeyatz hashem. If the baby are twins, she would be nemenes to say who is the bechara, who was born first, who was born second. Hamedavar mamur. When do we say that she's believed? That shelo yotzasa, she didn't leave the room in which they were born. So she's only believed up until the point where she leaves the room. V'chazar, and came back. Avol yotzasa v'chazar. But if she already left the room and now she came back in, ein in a menace, she's no longer believed. She's not going to remember. When she's right there, she'll remember. She leaves, she comes back, she's no longer believed. But Rabbi Eliezer, you need more than that. It's not enough that she shouldn't have left the room. It had to be huchzaka al aimda. She had to be huchzak in her position, and we'll see in a moment what that means. Nemenis from lav ein nemenis, my beinayu. What is huchzaka umda? In addition to not leaving the room, ikabenayu da hader appa. Rabbi Eliezer holds that a chaya is only believed which child was born first and which child was born second if she never turned away. She was looking at them the entire time. The moment she looks away, even though she's still in the room, she's no longer in a menace to say which one is which. However, the Tanakama held that as long as she's in the room, even if she turned away, she's still in a menace to say which child is which. Zok Gemara. What was the third case of Poiteres Chaverseh? It's not. The halach is Shalosh Noshim Shayu Yishenois B'mitach. If three women were sleeping in one bed, and Rashi says they couldn't have each been sleeping in a different corner of the bed, they had to be intertwined, rolling around with each other. And then V'nimtzes Dam Tachas Achas, and they found Dam, which we assume is Dam Nida, under one of the women. So the halach is, since they all could have been at that spot because they were moving around and they're intertwined, Kulan Tameos, all three of them are Tamei Misafik, that they might have been the one who saw Dam Nida. What happens if Botka Achas Mahen Benimtas Tameya? What if one of them was Boidik herself and she sees that she's the one who saw Dam? Then he Tameya B'chulim Taharis. Then we'll say that that spot of Dam found on the sheets was probably hers, and therefore they're all tahar. And this is where we say it only applies if she was boidik right away. Which means right away. Right after they found that dam, right away, within seconds, she did her bedika. Only then will we then say the dam probably came from her. But if not, we will not say that the dam came from her. Tana Rabbanan.
Right away after they found it? Right away
yes.
For what?
After they found it. Now there's a very interesting
what does the word sheer vest mean?
Sheer vest is used in Gemara Nida to mean immediately. Immediately. Let's look at Rashi. Rashi actually defines it. Exactly what it means. Let me just see Rashi here. Rashi says
where Rashi meets the short and the second.
Kishir vest la'achem etzia miyad u'meseches nida mafar shir vest she'oimid ha'eid. They have the eid bedika hu ha'kinuach It's right there beside the ein mechusar l'knech miyad. It's right there by her Yosy Mokum, and she can put it in right away. So it's literally within a split second. Okay, gewaltig. So zog the Gemara. Oh, so on this halach there's a shayla. How many women are in this bed? 3 women. It's a suffix tuma. The halachically, when there's 3 people together, it has the status of suffix tuma b'shus harabim. So for the Rishonim, why isn't this a classic case of suffix tuma b'shus harabim sveikai tahar? They should all be tahar. Why are they all tamei? It should be considered a suffix tuma b'shus harabim. That is the shaila that the Rishonim ask on this Gemara. So there's different svaras that are offered. But one of the svaras offered is that the case of suffix tuma b'shus harabim or suffix tuma b'shus hayachid is it's a suffix if a sheretz touched this piece of taharis or not. It's an external tuma. The question is, did it or did it not touch our taharis? That's where you say the halach of suffix tuma b'shus hayachid. But if it's a tuma hayotzim gufay, there we don't have the rule of suffix tuma b'shus hayachid. Now it's a little bit difficult to understand this pshat because, or maybe it's not difficult because the makar of suffix tuma is a saita, but a saita, I guess, is also considered, it's an external thing that caused her tuma. It was not a tuma hayotzim gufay. It was a tuma hanichnas l'gufay. So therefore, the rules of suffix tuma b'shus hayachid or b'shus harabim are not relevant in this case. So to Gemara weiter. Tana Rabbanon, Nemenes Chaya Loimar, Ze Kohen, Ze Levi, Ze Nesin, Ze Mamzer. Depending on which child it is, she can identify this child came from this mother who's a Kohen, and this child came from this mother who's a Levi, as well as in the Nesin and a Mamzer. Hamedavar Mamurim, Shalekara Allah Shem Ir. That's only if there wasn't rumors or things against her that are contradicting. If there's opposition to what she's saying, then so what exactly is this ir that will invalidate the nemanus of the chay? Which means one guy comes along and said that he doesn't think that this is this person's child. Ir never works unless there's at least 2 people. Ir trey, it must be that you don't have aidus, of course. Ir just means talking rumors through 2 people, but not that there's an aid, of course, that says they know this child is possible. So it means ir, there's 2 people that are suggesting that maybe this child is not kosher. Maybe even if one person is mentioning that this child is not kosher, but that's when you have a person who has a cheskes kashrus. That person, we will not shed any suspicion under yuchsin if there's less than two people. But a newborn does not have a chazak. There's a claim that this child was born to a psul. One would also be believed.
Yosy?
Yes.
Are we not believing her just because we think she made a mistake, or that she has a motive to lie?
You're talking about the chaya?
Yeah.
It could be a little bit of both, but Rashi specifically says it's a question of a mistake. Because if we look at Rashi, where Rashi says the chaya, Rashi says, no, I'm sorry, Rashi does not say something perish. Rashi just says neman or not neman. Rashi doesn't say that it's because, Rashi doesn't discuss whether it's because of memory or whether it's because she's lying. But the svara is miyad or not miyad. Why would someone lie because it's not miyad? Miyad means it's still clear with them. There's a memory she's focusing on. So I think the svara is that it's not a question of lying. It's a question of her memory. When there's an error here, so then maybe again, it questions her memory. We don't have to say that she's a liar to not believe her.
It's very not clear what the story was. How with what confidence does that this ma'arer come say, I think it's yes or not? Was it that? It was.
What's he saying?
She's saying, I'm the nurse in the hospital. I know that this baby came from this mother. That's it. So if she's married to Cohen, he's a Cohen.
And someone said, somebody else in the hospital said, Zebin no, Shalashis Mamzer. Somebody else in the hospital said, no, this child, I think this child is the child of the Ashes Mamzer. But some other person walking by. But it's the anesthesiologist. Someone else said, but not someone who has the months of to wait him. There's a challenge. She's only in a menace if there's no challenge at all. There's another very big sugya that's a little bit relevant here, and I want to touch on it just for a minute. That is, there's a very big machlokes between the Rambam and the Rashba, another Rishonim. We have a rule, Sofik Dairaisa Luchum. The question is, this rule that we have, Sofik Dairaisa Luchum, is that Midaraisa? Is it Midaraisa Sofik Dairaisa Luchum? Or is it only a Chumr Derabana that Sofik Dairaisa Luchum? There is such a Shaila. It's a famous Shaila. The Rashba brings in our Gemara as a Raya to the Rambam, who says it's only Midirabban. Why? Because we had discussions on Amud Aleph with the Safek Mamzer. We said the Pasuk tells us that a Mamzer Vadei lo Yavai Bekal, but a Safek Mamzer Yavai Bekal. So Zokti Rashba could be, this is the Raya that the Rambam brings, that Midiraisa, Safek Deraisa is Lakula. You learn it from Mamzer. The Torah tells us by Mamzer that if it's a Safek Mamzer, it's Mutter Minat Torah. So you see from here that all Safek Deraisas are Mutter Minat Torah, and that we're Machmer in the Safek Deraisa is a Chomer Derabban. That's what those who learn, that's the Raya of the Rambam, that Safek Deraisa is Minat Torah, it's Lakula, and it's only L'chomer Midrabban. But there are those who say Adarab, from the fact that the Torah had to tell us by Mamzer that Sofik, the rice is Lakula, vice the rice everywhere else in Shas, by other mitzvahs, where the Torah was not Megala, it's Sofik the rice L'chomer. So this is one of the core places where the Rishonim discuss this Machlokes Rambam and Rashba as to is Sofik the rice L'chomer, Midarais or Midarbanon, from the fact that the Torah specifically says that a Sofik Mamzer is Mutter Lovai Bekam. Okay, let's see the Gemara weiter. Now we're going to get into the same Shiloh with Dinim moments. Nemon Bal Mekach Loimar Lozeh Macharti V'Lozeh Ein Macharti. What happens if I sell the latest in cell phone technology, and I had one cell phone of this new type left, and it was very coveted. It was a kosher phone that worked. So everybody was fighting for it. And it's a question, did Reuven buy it from me or did Shimon buy it from me? The seller is never to say, Lozeh macharti, v'lozeh ein macharti.
The guess is loy macharti.
Sorry? Oh, it changes from ein to loy. Okay, it makes more sense. When do we say that the seller is believed? Is bisman shemekhay biyad. That's when he's holding the mekach in his hand. Once they're fighting over it, and he doesn't have control of it, he's not Neman. And here there's a very big machlokes, Rashi and Tosfos. Why is he Neman by mekach biyad? So let's start off with Rashi. Rashi says, the Rami alei lemedek, it's incumbent on a seller to know who he sold to. Shaloi lachser loy miseh ulahach shaloi damov v'yitin hamekach l'mishloi nimkerloi. You're not allowed to back out of a sale that you made, even if you're going to refund the money. You know why? The kamlei b'mishapar. The Gemara in Bava Kama tells us that someone who backs out of a deal is, although there's no financial thing we could do to him, we can't force him. We can't force him if there was no kinyan. But we say Misha Para, whoever was Pairea from the Dar Mabel, from the Dar Floga, should also punish a person who doesn't keep his word. So since, as long as the mekach is in his hands, it's incumbent upon him to make sure that he's not backing out on the deal. He'll be focused. He'll be focused to know who bought it from him. But once it's not in his hands anymore, Rashi, and there's two people fighting over it, the moicher is no longer neman, the kivun alei rami, since it's not incumbent upon him to know who did it, to know whose it is, because it's out of his hands. He wasn't chayzer; it already happened. He's not going to focus on who this belongs to.
Remember who he sold
That
it?
is the shita of Rashi. Tosfos, yes,
He won't remember who he sold it to 2 minutes ago?
correct.
Come on.
Well, we're not talking about a guy who sells one cell phone a week. We're talking about a guy who sells 200 cell phones an hour. You think your cashier will know who came and who didn't come 2 minutes later?
Beidem geklickt auf das, was ich mit der letzte, so scheiße, schade, so.
So let me look at Rabbeinu Tam's pshat, because Rabbeinu Tam is a completely different pshat. He doesn't like Rashi's pshat, and he says, "L'chein pirish Rabbeinu Tam, bizman shemekha biyadoi, v'osu nemu mitamigoi." You know why the owner is believed, the seller is believed, because if it's in his hands, he has a migo. Migo de motzi omar loy macharti, or chazarti v'kanisa. If he's the muchzik, he could deny the whole thing. So therefore, he has a migo that is believed. Therefore, he's believed. But if he doesn't have it in his hands anymore, then the moicher is not believed. The oslo shayach migo, because then there wouldn't be a migo. So
if it's still in his hand, they weren't cutting it yet.
but that's also true. But he still has a migo.
And the seller, but that's from the seller. Right?
He still has a migo. So
Again,
those
but
are two.
If
I'm
he's
sorry?
still holding his hand, they never made a kinyan. If they never made it, it's not theirs yet. For sure, you could say.
I'm sorry.
Meretich van a metaltelem.
Correct.
So they never made a kinyan.
How do you know they never made a kinyan? Maybe they made a kinyan and it's still in his hand. Maybe they made a kinyan. He made a kinyan mashicha, and then for some reason they gave it back to the owner to hold, and then somebody else comes along and says it's mine.
His hands are referring to himself.
So we have a machlokes Rashi and Tosfos, and it'll play out soon. But the machlokes is the namonos of the seller while it's in his hand, because it's Romi Alei, it's incumbent on him to know, so he should avoid Rabbi Shapara, or does he have a migo? A migo can keep it even. Therefore, he'll be believed. So let's see the Gemara weiter. Frag the Gemara on Amud Aleph. Frag the Gemara on Amud Aleph, and then we'll after we do the kasha, we'll stop. Just turn over onto Daf Ayin Dalet Amud Aleph. Frag the Gemara. The next is Zuzei Mimanoka. Let's see who he took the money from. So it's Rashi, Kasol Kadaita Shalakiba Mois Elamayachad Mehen. We're assuming he was only makabel the money from one of the two, and therefore, Havade Mitkedoker, Daddy should for sure remember who he took money from. Zuzei the man kabel. Okay, it's already 6:50, but tomorrow we'll go through the shitas. If you learn like Rashi, what is the kasha of a nechse Zuzei Miman Akat? Because the question is the question why he is not believed after it leaves his hand. He should be able to remember who he took the money from, as Rashi says. Tosfos learns, why would he be believed, even if it's in his hand and he has a migoi? Why would he be believed if we know that he only took money from A, even though he has a migo? How would he be believed to say that he took the money from B? It's an anan sahati that the person who gave him the money is the one who he sold it to. So how could he be believed with his migoi? Connected an anan sahadi that is saying that the other person is the one who bought it because it's the other person who paid. We'll review this tomorrow, B'ez Hashem, and we'll be mamshech tomorrow. So everybody should have a wonderful day.
Enjoy the chasam.
Thank you very much. Have a wonderful day. Chaim, thank you very much for turning on the television.
Not the television, the screen. Yes, Yossi.
Yeah, it's good. I mean the television. The television.